Okay, now we are all live. Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, everyone.
For having
It's
us, Gigi.
uh, so today we have Juan, Ricardo, and Donkey from Xebia, who are authors of Fundamentals of Analytics Engineering book that is coming out soon. When's the release date?
So
That's it.
the ebook is now for pre-sale in Amazon, and in April 14th is the printed version is going to be available as they told us if everything goes well.
Got it. Cool. Well, I'm very excited for the release of this book. I had a chance to do a little bit of a peek into some chapters, and I was quite impressed by the quality and the amount of content that was packed into the book. Uh, so, with that, I would love to kick it off with a round of introductions. This is actually the very first time that I'm having more than just one guest, so I'm very excited to kind of like have more of these variety of opinions and the conversations that come in. And you all have slightly different backgrounds amongst you of how you got to analytics engineering too. So it would be great to learn more about that. Juan, do you want to start?
For sure. Yes, I'm Juan, born and raised in Colombia. Professionally speaking, I started as the person that was doing dashboards, even though I didn't study anything particularly technological. But very quickly, I started noticing that the better you are at engineering, the less dependencies you have with other teams. So that really pushed me into learning back then Python, SQL, even R, and all of these things. Later on, I was still doing a job on BI, but I noticed that quite often I wanted to do more of the data modeling side, more SQL work. And so I applied for a job as data engineer, which I didn't get because everybody agreed that I was too much analytics. But then time passed, and in 2020, Xebia reached out to me saying, "Hey, there is this job called analytics engineering." I personally didn't hear about it back by then, and it was a perfect match of exactly what I wanted. So got into the role very early. I was the first in the Xebia team.
Cool. Yeah. And so my name is Dumke. I'm like Juan, I'm based in Amsterdam. And my background is more in web analytics and web tracking. So I did a lot of tracking implementations on websites and apps. And kind of similar to what Juan said, I realized like, hey, this data is actually more valuable when you add other data sources in there, but there's not really a team usually around that to get that done. So you learn other skills to make it work, hack it together. And so gradually I transitioned into this kind of data engineering role where I brought web analytics data together with other types of data sources from organizations. And I realized like most of my value was added when extracting this kind of behavioral data and making sure that we can model it and getting insights from it and really help the business to understand the value of the data, especially when it's combined with other types of data. And so I was very excited for Juan to start this book initiative, and I've been happy to contribute on some of the chapters, one on data ingestion and one on data quality and observability.
Thanks, Donkey. And I am Ricardo Granados. I am from Mexico. I was for more than 10 years a consultant in the energy sector, basically doing data analysis on that market. In the beginning, Excel was more than fine, and then you start getting into electricity markets and this type of indicators that have millions of rows, and then you have to start using other tools like Python and other type of coding. So I did a specialization on that science, and here I met a team from a fintech company we did a contest and we won the first place in Mexico City. And I got hired as a data scientist. And usually, as things happen, the company was not ready for that science. The data infrastructure was a little bit of a mess. So they hired a chief data officer that brought in two data engineers, and she told me help them to build a data warehouse. So I got introduced to be building a data warehouse in the cloud with a very talented team. I learned a lot about data modeling and how this cloud environment works. And then I got relocated to Amsterdam, where I got my first job as an analytics engineer. And after 1 year of being working as an analytics engineer, I joined Xebia, and now I'm part of this wonderful uh, book. And one of the things I was wondering at first is what exactly how to define better what am I, because people ask me what do you do for work, what do you do for living, and then I say analytics engineering, and everyone makes this face of okay, what does that mean? And we have to yeah, briefly summarize it as something to do with data. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Oh yeah, I say programmer when I don't want to have that talk.
Amazing. It's also great to hear that all of you came from a bit of a different background in the past, but converged in this now career as an analytics engineers. So I would love to a little bit hear about the origin story of the book. What made you to decide to write the book, and also how did you guys decide to kind of have like what to be part of the chapters?
Yeah, maybe I can take it up. As I mentioned, I'm one of the earliest adopters of the term analytics engineering, at least like let's say back in 2021, early 2021, when you would Google it, I would appear higher up in both LinkedIn. I'm also the owner of the analytics engineering meetup. I'm not necessarily the best, but I guess back at the time when Pact was interested in starting a book about this topic, I was one of the people that they reach out to. And my first impression was like, no, there's no way I'm going to write a book together with my job. But I'm very happy I decided to bring it back to the team. And I literally said, I checked the post recently, if three people say that they want to co-write this with me, I'm going to do it.
Ah.
And in the end, we had a bigger group, but that was amazing because that, of course, reduced a little bit of the workload. But on the bright side, we really got the chance to assign the topics that everybody knew really well to each of the authors. We do happen to have a very diverse group of authors, maybe by mistake somehow, but it felt all very natural in place. We made a document with all of the chapters. I made the very first outline, and we just during the meeting we said everybody pick a chapter, and there was very little argument of too many people wanting a chapter. I think we went very neatly into no, these are my expertise, and that's really reflected in the book. We literally spoke about the things that we knew best.
That's amazing. Maybe just for the audience, if you can also share a little bit of the background about Xebia and the work that Xebia does across the globe, that would be great.
Of course. Yeah, at Xebia, we are a consultancy company based in the Netherlands. We have actually almost every type of tech specialty, but we all work for Xebia Data. Back then, I think in 2013, the company started selling Hadoop clusters, but since then, like we have like grown quite a lot. We were probably the first company in the Netherlands hiring analytics engineers. Um, and what really specializes us is we really like knowledge sharing. Like we do have a lot of events where people teach each other. We really have this culture of mentoring and showing the cool things that you're building. And the other thing is that we really strive to go for quality. So we always try to make things good, and the people that they hire, they're all amazing engineers. Amongst my colleagues, there are some people I've learned quite a lot from.
Yeah, and I think it actually says a lot that we're not even the first or only authors in within Xebia Data. We've had people write books on Airflow, on Python, on all kinds of stuff. So it's really great. Like people say, surround you. You're the sum or the average of the five people around you. I think being in a group like this and working together like this is definitely a good incentive to write a book.
Yeah, if I may add something
Amazing.
else, I think that the diversity of the team also helped a lot into this, and
Yeah.
it's fostered by Xebia. So we had at least 3 members from America, 3 members from Europe. We had almost half and half women and men, and we had a lot of discussions between the team. So I think to have that space and to foster this diversity also helped for us to be able to deliver a book while we were juggling a consultant role full time.
Indeed, and it's not only
For sure.
demographic.
Yeah.
We have some people that are outstanding at, for example, deployment. Some people that are great at clouds. Well, you have, for example, Dumpy, that is probably the most knowledgeable in the team when it comes to ingestion. I do quite a lot with dashboards, so even in that regard, we're quite diverse.
Yeah, I think one of the parts that is helpful for you all to write a book or the Xebia team to write a book is because you're exposed to so many different environments of your clients that work with you, and you've seen inside and out. So I think it's great that you guys have kind of put in the effort to write out the best practices out of those experiences. So with that, I would love to start with the topic, today's topic about analytics engineering. Perhaps if we can define what is analytics engineering and how is analytics engineering teams work in organization that would be different for companies that may not have analytics teams. Ricardo, would you like to define this for us?
Yeah, for sure. So actually, this was one of the main discussions we had when we were starting to write chapter 1 of the book, because whenever you go and look for online sources to see where it was defined or where is the first time it is calling the term analytics engineer, you see a lot of different and diverse definitions of what the role means. And personally, I have found that even the managers struggle a little bit to know what are the difference between the different data roles. And when they are looking for an analytics engineer, they don't really know what they're looking for or what they need to ask during the interviews. So we decided to coin our own, let's say, collaborative or cumulative definition of what is an analytics engineer based on all of these previous experiences. And we define analytics engineer at this habilitator role that serves as a bridge between the business and the data engineering team in order to accelerate and create this positive feedback to create data quality, quality pipelines, quality data pipelines in order to have quality data in your warehouse, right? So we have a small analogy that if you had like this supermarket, imagine that the data engineer team is the one that drive the trucks and it makes sure that the products are taken from point A to point B, and the data analyst is the people that is in the cashiers that knows what is being sold and have all the sums and how much money has been spent. But the analytics engineer is the one that thinks on how is the most sensible way to set up the products in the store. How is the most sensible way to show the products to the users so they can easily find it? So this analogy helps us understand what happens if you don't have an analytics engineer in your team. This means that someone else needs to do this task, and usually that detriments on their time on what they're doing, because they need to step out of the role to start doing these other tasks.
So then can you share a bit more about how the traditional data engineering or data science slash data analyst work compared to this segment of analytics engineering teams?
Yeah, for sure. So let's say the traditional data team was compromised or comprised of data engineering teams that make the data pipelines, grab the data from the sources and put it somewhere to be queried, and then the consumers of the data, that can be data analysts or data scientists or business users. In the beginning, or in the traditional data warehouse, the data engineer was owner of these pipelines, and it was the team that needed to ensure the data quality and governance and everything around this data in the data warehouse. But when everything went to the cloud and we changed the paradigm, then we see that we stopped doing the ETL classic transformation cycle, and we went to the ELT. So we extracted, loaded, and transformed instead of extract, transform, and load. And this meant that the data engineering team stopped their work in the data warehouse, and then the data users needed extra steps in order to extract insights from the data that was in the cloud. So this gap was created in there. And I think that the analytics engineering role is born of a necessity of these organizations to bridge this gap between the data consumers and the data engineering team.
I love
Yeah,
that
and
analogy.
I think you also don't need to forget like how much a single person today can do with all the tools that are available in this field, right? So it used to be, like Ricardo said, you used to have a data engineering team and you used to have a team of analysts, and really this wasn't um, available to many small and medium-sized businesses. But I think with the tool set, even something like Select Star that is available today, a single person or a very small team can do a lot of this stuff. And so you get back to kind of what Juan originally said, like, hey, you have this analyst who is learning more and more technical skills to solve like real world problems in their organization. And that is kind of a trend that makes these people analytics engineers, because they're using new kinds of tools, becoming more tech savvy, while still solving the analytics side and the analytics problems within the business.
Yeah.
Yep.
One thing worth mentioning is in the past, all of these definitions were very much like whatever analysts and data engineers don't want to or cannot do. So we're really an interception field, but it is evolving, and now it's like getting its own identity, and it's becoming a bit more precise. What exactly do we do instead of what we take from other teams?
Yep. Oh, I think those are all great points to make the definition of analytics engineering more clear. So now for us, the other half of the topic, data governance. Data governance used to be more of a old school clunky term where it focused on control, access, and privacy of data. But I saw that the data governance itself was its own chapter in analytics engineering, the fundamentals of analytics engineering book. And this was also one of the reasons why I wanted to do this talk. Why do you believe that data governance is so important for analytics engineering?
That's a little bit my fault. It's a topic very close to my heart, and I firmly believe that as analytics engineers, we're in a really good position to work towards any type of data governance goals in the company. On the one hand, like we're close to the business or the data users that feel the pains of bad governance. But on the other hand, we sometimes have the access and the skills really to be able to affect governance at scale. That makes us like really good candidates to be like at the center of something like a data observability tool, to test for quality, to build CI pipelines. And so I thought it was really interesting to put it as a topic in the book. It's the last chapter. It starts with what exactly is data governance, which is very cliche. It's like the people, technology, process pillars. But the chapter evolves into what exactly happens when governance doesn't go well. And finally, what is your role as an analytics engineer? And I do mention some very concrete things, like making sure that the ownership of data products becomes seamless. There is also training and development, but what I really hope is that people that read that chapter will find a lot of things that are relevant to their organization.
Cool. One area of data governance and the reason why companies think about data governance initiatives inside the company is because not necessarily just because the privacy, because they already segmented out their most private data in a separate place, but mainly because uh, of their main data mart, where the data is being democratized, and they want to make sure data is being utilized correctly and in a trusted way. And I think this area puts a lot of highlight on how data quality is starting to become a lot more important in the era of analytics engineering. So I really enjoyed reading that part of how data quality comes into play with the work of analytics engineering. So Domke, as an author of the chapter, can you tell us a little bit more about how you define data quality and how the data quality can be preserved, measured, and improved for analytics engineers?
Yeah, definitely. So what I think is really interesting, and what I see a lot in the consultancy work that we do is that data quality is often defined as a tool, right? So people will say, "Hey, let's buy tool A or B to solve our data quality problem." And to me, the first question is to actually define the problem of data quality. Because most of the time, like, your data doesn't need to be perfect to make the right decisions. Like, it has to be just good enough, and you can spend a lot of time on trying to make your data perfect and your dashboards perfect, but it doesn't. At some point, you have diminishing returns on those investments. So you have to make sure that your data quality is just good enough to make the right decisions. And so what I try to do is really define uh, a different, like, separate the kind of problems that you can have around data quality and separate them from the solutions that you have to solve data quality issues, right? So you can have different types of solutions, like a data catalog or a semantic layer, and all kinds of other tools, observability tools, to solve your data quality issues. But to do that and to really apply those tools, you need to understand the problems first. And so I split the problem out into three major parts, really. And basically, it all starts with your source data, right? The data is collected somewhere, and there's a reason that we need to move it from A to B. And sometimes you have control over that source. Like, for example, like I mentioned, I did a lot of web tracking implementations, and you can make sure that your web tracking implementation is better, or is improved, or is takes care of privacy and consent in a better way, so you can use that data better. So that's when you have control over the data. But sometimes you don't have control over that data, and you have to really make sure that you check if it's complete, if it's consistent and reliable. Maybe you have to validate the integrity of that source. And so the source is one big part, and then of course when you're moving from A to B, you have a pipeline that runs. So that's kind of where the extraction and the transformations happen. So that's another area where a lot can go wrong, because maybe your server didn't spin up and your data wasn't extracted, or someone made an error somewhere, and certain things are filtered out. So a lot can happen to data in the process. And then the third part is what I kind of broadly call governance, which to me is everything around how we look at and define data, right? So the way I see it is that a lot of problems in data quality come from just having different definitions of what something means. So this is usually due to different teams working with the same data. So maybe there's a operational or application team that has developed an application, and over the years a certain field has, with a certain name, has a certain meaning that might not be the same meaning for someone who extracts that data and does analysis on this, right? So there's always a history to these kind of things, and then you have two people looking at the same field and making different assumptions about it. So that's, to me, a classic kind of governance problem of data quality. Those definitions. Yeah, so that to me really is the core of data quality issues.
Yeah, you highlighted how data governance impacts data quality. Without governance, there is no good quality data. So the three things that you mentioned: documentation, consensus, and ownership and accountability. Can you dive into this a little bit more? First of all, what type of documentation are we talking about? Are we talking about like data dictionary or business glossary or all of the above? How do you usually recommend your clients to get started on data documentation? The second, like when we say consensus, does this mean that we need to have a data contract and a process in every single step of the way? How do you consider like small data teams, especially like, analytics engineers? We just talked about how small teams can do a lot. So what are the ways to get to quick consensus and move fast here? And then last but not least, what are the types of ownership and accountability mechanisms do you recommend having for analytics engineering teams? Sorry, that was a big
Yeah,
question.
Yeah.
that's a really big question. Yeah, let me
Explore.
see where I can get started. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but really really good points as well. And you're totally right. I tend to be very pragmatic in these things, right? So you can really go overboard with documentation and consensus and accountability, but it has to fit your business, right? So you have to see where is my investment most warranted, and so I think where you need to start is, where are the business questions? Like, what are the most urgent needs for your organization? What questions are being most asked? What discussions are most common in terms of miscommunication around definitions? And so there's, to me, really two parts to this. So on the one hand, yes, you need to document this and make sure that you, as a analytics engineer or as an analytics team or data team, know what you're working with, and that you document your assumptions and the choices that you make in a way that you can um, look back at your historical self and really know what happened at the time you made that choice, right? Because it's all too often that we come back to our SQL query a year from now and we're like, I don't remember what I did here or why I did this. So that to me is kind of the first start of documentation, right? Knowing the assumptions that you make and then writing those down could be a comment. And then you can go a little bit further, right? You can document this on maybe a Confluence page or in Markdown or wherever you store it. And that kind of brings me to the second point is that it needs to be accessible to the outside world, or at least within your organization as well. And so before you really get into all the tools that can make your life a lot easier in this sense, I think something as simple as a markdown file or even an Excel file, if you're really just getting started, can really go a long way. And then once you start to see a little bit of traction here, you can look into tools that make your life a lot easier and that allow you to version control your documentation, to share it with properly with others in your organization, make discoverability a lot easier. And then you can start adding in those things around accountability as well, right? Because then you can say, hey, this field comes from this source or maybe two sources even, and we have someone within the business who can take ownership of that field. And once someone takes ownership, we can make certain agreements or service level objectives or whatever you want to call them, to say like, okay, then if this field is important to our stakeholders down the line, we need to really one, document that this person is accountable for that field, and then two, make certain agreements on what the uptime or kind of quality for that field should be, and then three, indeed define and test the quality of those fields. So that is kind of how I look at. I mean, there's a lot more in this question, but I'm trying to be a little bit brief here. Give a brief overview.
All good. I don't know, Juan, if you wanted to add anything here regarding how data governance impacts data quality. I guess one follow-up question though is like, do you consider having just on the documentation and ownership consensus this front, like how much of completeness is required? Like what is enough, or is there a threshold of enough documentation in data?
I think I have a good one. Before, just one quick main thing I wanted to mention is I've always thought it's funny that the conversation about governance in the realm of data is quite often like, why do you need it? Why it's not boring? But if you look at other fields like, building airplanes or maybe HR, it's really interesting because people there don't even conceive the notion like, what do you mean there is no process for firing somebody or something along those lines?
Mm,
So, as a field, it's really interesting how we could eventually evolve to a place where, like, um, anything from like making a PR is like very well structured, and then this person does this and this person this other thing. But to answer your question very specifically of how much documentation is enough, in chapter 13, the one about governance, I don't speak per se about documentation, but I talk about ownership. I think mature data teams are teams where ownership of any type of data asset, could be a table, a dashboard, a pipeline, DBT repo, can be easily transferred from one owner to the other. And of course, documentation is a massive part of that, but there is a lot more. There is like prioritizing code readability. There is organizing frequent trainings, code reviews, training people. So the question of how much documentation is enough, it's enough when you feel that ownership of whatever is the thing that you are documenting between different people can be seamless. But
Yeah,
I do
makes
make some
sense.
more tips directly.
yeah. If I may make a small comment,
Yeah.
I think that in technology or data related things, the weakest link is always the human factor. So you see all these tools, shiny tools that have all of these fields to document or to make comments or to put things, and then you see people that just put a small dash in that, and that's it. And you see how people fail to follow these practices, and I feel that one of the main contributions of the analytics engineering in one team is help enforcing these best practices and then help pushing for this governance to be in place. And as Tomke said, going back to basics, it doesn't need to be a really shiny tool for it to work. Um, you can have Kanban boards made with stickies on a room. It will serve the same as a shiny tool that has a Kanban board, right? So going back to documentation, having a data catalog, stakeholders, business requirements. I think having the fundamentals of knowing that that is important and that you have to have them documented somewhere and that you have to have this consensus on what this means. It's the base on what to build everything else, and then tools may come and go and may make your life easier or harder to to achieve this. But I think the main one of the main benefits or the main contributions the analytics engineer can do in the team is to push for these best practices and to ask for it to be done or to be the one that enforce these type of things.
Yeah,
I
and
actually
again, I
have,
think. Go ahead, Juan.
yeah, I wanted to mention something because I don't fully agree with Ricardo Donkey that any type of Excel file is good enough for documenting, because quite often, like most people do try, I know to document things, but all of those like half life efforts end up dying. So to me, companies that really take seriously, like where do we centralize information, how do we do it, this is like you're only allowed to close this story when this is documented, that really shows. And I think this whole discussion of where do we do it, Confluence is an Excel file just okay. I think data catalogs come in place and they solve a lot of these things, because you need a tool that is properly centralized. You need something that is flexible enough to document all of the things that you do, like code, but also like things like tribal knowledge, data definitions, and so on, and make it accessible and especially automate as much as you can because people never keep things up to date. So just
Yeah, I
my
think
final word.
especially the automation part
Yeah,
is really important here, and I do agree with you that an Excel file is not enough. It's just I do think that not having a data catalog is also not an excuse to not document anything, right? So
for sure.
if you don't have anything, you can always start with an Excel file. But that being said, I do think it's becoming just like we started with this role of the analytics engineer because so many more tools are available. I think all these tools also have a lot of standardization and modularization, right? So what you see is that one person can import, let's say, 20 marketing sources from an ETL tool, and all those marketing sources will already be documented. So there's definitely no excuse to not document those
Yeah,
sources. And what you should be focusing on instead is look at the parts of your organization that are unique in the way that you combine these sources, or that you run queries on top of them, or that you combine it with other data from that is kind of proprietary to your organization. And those are the important parts to document, right? And you can do that in a tool like dbt, for example, allows you to do that. And you can have prepackaged documentation from other dbt packages that you use. And so yeah, I do think it also is becoming easier uh, to document this as a single person or a small team of analytics engineers.
for sure. My quick hot take is the IT world needs to learn a lot from librarians. I think we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like librarians have already thought of a lot of ways to centralize information, catalog it, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
and I
that's
think,
a good
and
idea.
so one of the initiatives that I'm really excited about is a very small kind of repository which is called SOMA, which stands for like the standard operating metrics of an organization, right? So you can have right now the analytics engineering world is kind of going crazy around metrics and metrics layers and semantic layers, and we can start thinking about standardizing the metrics of, let's say, a SaaS or an e-commerce company, because a lot of times those will be the same, and you should really focus on, again, what distinguishes your organization, your business from the rest, instead of like continuously trying to reinvent the wheel. So I think defining kind of modules or standardized packages of metrics as well is really interesting for our type of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll chime in here as well, because we actually do a lot of work as a modern data catalog and automated documentation tool for a lot of analytics engineering teams today. So, in a nutshell, at Select Star, we will connect to data sources, bring out all the metadata, but we'll also process all the query history and logs to give you the relationships between different data points and different models and how they look like and how they interact with each other. And one of the parts that's really helpful regarding this is this prioritization of data, because we'll tell you which data is actually being utilized the most and by whom. You'll be able to start prioritizing which are the top 10% of the data that should require more documentation or like ownership perspective, so that you have a good maintenance actually and governance built into those. And then you can start stitching together other related data sources that may not be as popular, but is still an important data sets that you have in the company. So I think that's just kind of like, like where to start from. And
Yeah.
then to add on the documentation, I think there are a lot of other sources of this metadata that you can go to. We do a lot of processing of underneath the hood of BI tools. And frankly, this is a place where we see a lot of semantic level information coming from on the business side. So when you look at the dashboards that your management teams use, or if you're a marketing team's analytics engineer, if you look at what marketing teams consume the most through lineage and popularity, you can start seeing, okay, which fields, dimensions, and measures are the important ones to standardize and make sure that everyone has that consensus behind it. So this is like a process that, in a way, it becomes a project, but having a tool like Select Star has been like basically accelerating any of these like month of projects into weeks, is basically what we've seen with a lot of clients.
Nice.
And so Shinji, if I can ask you a question, like what do you see? What are the biggest areas for teams implementing Select Star that where do they see the biggest improvements, or what are the biggest pain points that they're solving, and what types of teams are implementing this?
Sure. So overall, I would say like a lot of the teams that really leverage Select Star have a data team, whether that's a combination of data engineering and analytics, or just the analytics engineering teams with other BI analysts or business analysts. And usually the team sizes range from, I would say, like minimum like 5 people in the team, all the way to hundreds of people. And depending on the size of the teams, the way that they utilize Select Star is also slightly different. And I think that also comes from like the initial, like the objective of like why you're bringing on a data management or data governance tool like Select Star. Is it primarily so that you have a good consensus between the data teams? Or is it also because you want a single source of truth that you can give to your clients, like your internal stakeholders, so that they can have a better understanding of data? And
Oh, Shinji, can you hear
I
us?
think we lost her for a bit.
Could be. Hello. Well, maybe while she's back, anybody has a question from the audience? I see that there is this little panel where you can comment things. Mm. Well, maybe we might as well use some of this time to talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about the book. Ah,
sorry
Shinji.
There
about
we
that,
go.
guys.
No
My
worries, no
internet
worries.
just like completely dropped.
We
Um,
we
so
lost you
I
for a
dropped off,
second.
I think, at the time when I was trying to talk about where our customers get the most value out of Select Star. I think to answer your question, Donkey. I was going to say, I don't know if this got caught, but it's the utilization of column level lineage. And it's the column level lineage along with understanding the usage, to be honest.
Yeah.
A lot of tools may provide you with just the lineage of where the data came from or where the data is going to. But when you look at it in the lens of exactly like how the data has been transferred, then you can also see whether this field is being utilized only for filters or actual values are being aggregated. So if that impacts quality. Another big part that you can see is in high level, how do I migrate like one part of the data to another? And then last but not least, when you can integrate lineage like select through API. So we provide the full API services for any of the lineage operation. We have a lot of customers that have basically hooked up our lineage for their CI/CD pipeline. So anytime that their production data changes or their upstream data models change, they get an automated report about what the impact will look like so that the data pipeline just doesn't break right away. So I would say the lineage is a biggest part. Increasingly, we are starting to see the documentation part to be super helpful because of popularity. And also, we have a lot of AI generated documentation, AI assisted questions and answers, and also like a Slack bot that can act as like your bot analyst for servicing rest of the data team as well as the organization. So these are some of the things that I would say are the highlights of how companies use Select Star today.
From my perspective, I always think that the moment that anybody gets onboarded in a data project and you start building something, dashboard, whatever it is, a DBT model, there is always a certain time that gets lost while you're still understanding like what is the data, which data exactly do I need, can I trust this? And sometimes quite a lot of human time gets lost in doing that process. I think the biggest and strongest argument for data catalogs, at least from my selfish perspective as somebody that uses them, is it takes me much less to get started with work. It's like they really cut a lot of the speed of delivery.
Yep. So I know, Juan, you mentioned in your data governance framework, people, process, and technology. We
Yes.
also have a question from the audience. that asked more about the technology and tools. But do you want to maybe start giving us that high level of what is important to define for people, process, and technology? And maybe we can go deeper into the tools.
Of course. A good summary of the chapter is I always mention it's almost never your job to create governance frameworks from scratch. Like there are people that actually do that for a living, but quite often you're responsible to understand the governance vision of your company and implement it directly on the tools. Uh, Going back to quite often when they define governance, they mention the three pillars. Like a framework is composed by people, technology, and processes and how they interact with each other. But very specifically in the book, the topics that I mentioned is one is ownership. I think it's very important for you to be able to transfer ownership. We talk about that. There is data quality and integrity. Donkey talk a little bit about it. But some topics that we haven't talked about is like training. There is managing data assets, and under that, things like monitoring, user provisioning, access control fall into place. Data definitions, we already also talked a little bit about that. I'll never forget in my first company, there was this thing called a sales according to marketing and a sales according to finance. And they were different and they all benefited people depending on what bonus scheme they had. So all of those topics are very important. Maybe so that we don't have to go into detail to each of them, what I tell you is in the chapters of the book, we do mention governance, but it's quite often from the perspective of an analytics engineer. So not somebody that does like professional frameworks for a living.
Sure. So we do have a question related to this from
Sure.
Laksha. His question was whether the data governance go hand in hand with the data engineering work assignments, or should there be a separate team, like dedicated team for data governance for this framework?
I
What are
think
your
both.
opinions on this?
On the one hand, it's everybody's responsibility to keep governance in place, just like everybody's responsible for not throwing trash into the streets. But teams that have like governance specific roles, they tend to flourish quite a lot. And I'm not always saying like data governance, chief of data governance or something like that. Sometimes, for example, the Scrum roles, like the or any type of project manager or somebody that manages to keep like people and process always functioning and to standardize things, that works quite well. So in short, I think that having something like either a technology owner, like a data lake owner, um, domain owner, like marketing owner, something like that, works quite well in keeping governance in place. But to a big extent, it's also the responsibility of everybody.
For sure.
Yeah, and I really like that analogy, Juan, of the trash analogy. Like you can have cleaners picking up all the trash after you, but that's never going to be enough, right? And so just to give a very practical example of what I see a lot again. Looking at web analytics, for example, because I see a lot of this happening there. You will have a team that builds a website or an app. They will collect data. It's their responsibility partially to identify where potential data collection issues are, where you're collecting user data when it's not allowed. Then the data passes through to the data team. And again, it's the data team's responsibility to identify, like, hey, I'm seeing credit card numbers, email addresses. That's not good. So it's their responsibility to identify these kind of issues, but you do need a overarching team or responsibility that can look across these teams and say, how as an organization are we handling user data? We need to have a policy in place for that so that we can make the right people accountable for that.
Yep. Maybe this is a good segue to jump into the technology perspective, because we also do have a question about what tools and tech stacks are analytics engineering engineers using today for governance?
Mhm.
Maybe if you guys want to talk about some of the tools that you've seen in the market or that you've used and why, that would be really helpful.
For sure. I can give you first a generic answer. Like the tools that you always see is one that helps you keep your code organized, two, one that helps you document, three, one that helps you with data quality, and four, one that helps you with communication. But of course, from organization to organization, they might be a bit different. For example, you see like GitHub or GitLab for code management. Even DBT, it's ultimately some sort of way to host a Git repo. You see tools for communication like Slack, Teams, sometimes Zoom, sometimes forcing everybody to come to the office, maybe. But I guess the one that we're really going to talk more here is like well, everything observability wise. Like, not every client that I go to has any data observability tool in place, but quite often I feel that they could benefit from them. And which ones we see in the wild, that varies quite a lot depending on their needs. If they go for something more modern data stack or more of the new cloud-based tools, a tool like Select Star could be a really good fit. But there are also some clients that are like painfully regulated, and so they have to go for some sort of observability option where the data barely travels, or if it travels in a very restricted way. Some people, they just choose the catalog because of the stack that they have, like, oh, this is friendly to Microsoft, this is native to Snowflake, and so on. But maybe if all of you, and especially Shinji, want to talk about like specific examples, that would be great.
Sure, I can talk a little bit about the features that we have on governance. I talked about lineage earlier. Uh, Understanding this data provenance is so important for governance perspective, because when you know like exactly where the sources of the data is coming from, you can basically look at that as to first audit whether the data is actually correct or not, and then two, also understand what the impact may look like, where that data is going to. And we've seen a number of companies that are utilizing this to start creating their audit reports. So you can look at, like, once you have any classification that's defined within your columns, then you can trace where that data is going through the lineage in the pipeline, and also look at the usage of those specific data sets and the queries. So any of the access audit can be done through lineage and also the usage mechanism. Another part that we see also companies starting to use for governance a lot is notification and communication front. So we have a schema change detection where we will notify you every time there is a metadata change. Like if a column has been deleted, or like a table name has been changed, things like that, we'll just notify you directly to the admins or the owners of the table, so that you are aware of, like, you created this model initially, but other people are using it now. And if there are changes, you get to know right away. And you can also share that information with your downstream users. Doesn't matter if you know who the downstream users are, like, we'll tell you who's being querying this table, who are the downstream users of the dashboard that consumes this data, so that your understanding of how data models changing or will be changing is also communicated throughout the organization. So like those are the two things that I will point out. Speaking of like the, I think you mentioned about some of the like a core governance. Like we are all aware that Europe in general have a lot more stricter rules and policies around data protection and privacy. We do have one more question about this. Will the EU AI Act have a lot of impact on companies in North America for data governance perspective? I guess this is more of a personal opinions, but what do you guys think?
Well, one thing I can tell you is, to be honest, I have no idea what exactly is in that regulation. But
Yeah,
my
it's so new.
clients, yeah, my clients that do governance the best are the ones that are terrified of certain regulations. I do happen to know that quite often that is SOX, quite often that is HIPAA. So maybe just to answer your question, even though I'm completely uninformed, I think it's all a matter of how strictly they're going to enforce it. Because
Yeah.
I've seen teams that they literally hire an army of people to be HIPAA compliant. But maybe, and please don't correct me because I know this is more your thing. I haven't seen like that amount of panic for example, GDPR, which is another European data regulation. So my quick answer is it depends on how heavily it is enforced, but regulations sometimes have amazing effects on the governance in companies.
Yeah, and indeed, if I can compare it to GDPR, which I'm more familiar with, I think that the interesting thing about GDPR was basically the EU saying like, hey, anyone who wants to do business in the EU has to follow GDPR. So that definitely affects North American companies. I'm curious to see how that will play out with this AI Act. I'm not too familiar with the details of that, but what we're still seeing with GDPR is it went into effect in 2018. The actual enforcement of GDPR is still like slowly going up and up, and the actual timeline for companies to comply with this has been very long, and a lot of companies are still struggling to comply with it. So yeah, I'd be interested to see if this kind of accelerates things a little bit. Maybe like I think we've had some really big court cases for like the big players out there, Apple and Meta and Google, along with like the Digital Market Acts as well. So there's definitely a lot more awareness. Companies are starting to get a little bit freaked out, like Juan says. That's been a great incentive for them to start complying. So the AI Act alone, maybe not so much, but in combination with GDPR, Markets Act, I think there's a lot going on.
Cool. Well, thank you. I just realized that we're just over time. I would love to like wrap this up. This went just so fast than I anticipated. Maybe to wrap up the conversation, if you guys can add like just what you see as the future of analytics engineering and or analytics engineering teams from your experience and what you're noticing in the market, that would be great.
Yeah. What we finished the book with is it's still a new field. It's like the people that are jumping to data science nowadays, not the same as the people that jumped to data science in, let's say, 2012. So for those of you looking for like a new career or something, you're still looking into something that is going to develop throughout the years. What I mentioned today is we used to be a boundary field, as in like a mix of this and a mix of that, but it's getting much more identity. It's not anymore just one company driving the narrative, but a lot of people jumping in and creating their own vision. So the future of this field, we're gonna see it maybe next year that we have a chat or one of the conferences if I see any of you or you, Chingy.
Yeah.
Do you have something to
Yeah,
add?
I think from my side, I totally agree with what Juan said. From a very practical perspective, I think a lot of tools can still grow up a little bit better. There's a joke that we make in the office, which is that the world is dominated by YAML. So everything is still like configuration as code, which is you're writing YAML all day. I hope to see that go at some point in the near future.
Okay.
Great.
We joke. I do more YAML than Python nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I believe that analytics engineering, as Juan said, is uh, maturing. It's growing up, and it's getting well defined in some of the companies. Now it's not such a niche word to hear when you say we need analytics engineer, you see that our clients now know that the role exists. Maybe don't know exactly what's the difference between one and the other, but it's getting out there. So I think that as long as data is important, the data roles are going to have an important um, field of action. And yeah, getting we were writing in the book as well that some of the tools and tips and tricks that we give to the reader is to keep evolving, keep learning. So um, I am sure that the definition and the things that we do today as analytics engineer are going to be changed because of this AI revolution that we are seeing, and then this maturity of these other tools that we are also exploring are going to enable analytics engineer to do much more in different fields. So I am very excited to see what's coming next. But I also see that we are being looked after a lot of clients now. So many teams are looking for analytics engineer, and our tasks related to in their teams. So that's also really nice to see.
For sure. I mean, for me, like what we all discussed, there's so much of the business that analytics now, engineering now touch. And there is going to be a lot more involvement from analytics engineers into data governance. And I really am excited about how data governance is not just the siloed area just for compliance or legal perspective, but it is a shared responsibility for everyone as they are consuming and continuing to utilizing data. So that's something that I see as the future. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining
Thank
me
you for
today.
having us, Cindy.
Juan, Ricardo, Donkey, this was a lot of fun. And thank you so much for the audience that's been still staying here. I would definitely recommend you to check out the upcoming book, Fundamentals of the Analytics Engineering. And I will definitely put a link and a follow-up post onto this so you can follow what is has been discussed and also check out the book yourself. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very
You
much.
too. Hey.